okay, so part two. So then the other side the other thing that I personally witnessed was whenever all of those, it was in like I think it was race 17 of like Moto 1. And my son was on of the main day. My son was on the gate, about to drop for his moto, for the first motos of the second moto. So he was race 2. So I think it was race 17. I want to say it was like 65 10 to 11s. But anyway, like that one was pretty horrific. Sorry about that. Dogs were going crazy. Anyway, where I personally in that race saw, like it was like 8 or more 65s jump on a Red Cross flag on the finish line jump. And I was horrified as I'm watching this happen, because I'm like, this Red Cross flag is clear. It is very visible. All of these riders can see this flag. And they end up not saying anything over the intercom. Like nothing. Nobody says like, hey, no jumping on Red Cross flags. Like you will be docked points, this and that, you know. I think that like in, you know, amateur motocross, we should just have a higher standard. I mean, I just don't understand like why we're not enforcing the rules that are put in play, you know. But then they want to enforce like other rules that seem just to be so asinine and ridiculous, you know. But I would think that the rules that matter about safety are the rules that should definitely be enforced, especially on a level of, let's say, at regionals, you know. And so anyway, I actually went up to the south of the border tent because I cannot communicate with Victory Sports. It just never goes good. So I went up to the south of the border tent and I said, hey, do you guys represent south of the border? And they said yes. And I said, okay, well, can we talk about this? I was like, did you just see what just happened at the finish line jump? And I explained what happened, and he was like, oh, I actually, goes back in his phone and he's looking, he actually had a video of it. And so he ended up going to the tower and said, I'm gonna go handle this and that. I'm sitting there waiting, I'm waiting. Like my kid's about to drop like in 2 races. And race 1 actually did have a red flag start. And when that red flag was out, every single one of those, like, and it was like the big boys, you know, it was like schoolboy, I think. And every single one of them checked up. They all checked up on the finish line. They did not jump. They checked up and they could visibly see that flag. So I know that all those other riders could have seen that flag, but they just didn't care. There was another spot where they were jumping in the back side on the back big triple tabletop, and apparently we're jumping on the Red Cross flag. Now, some of the riders said that they couldn't visibly see the Red Cross flag, but then did they move the Red Cross flag to where they were more visible? No. But like, why are we not even like, why isn't that like something that's already being done beforehand, you know, to make sure that all flaggers are in visible positions to riders, you know, like that just makes more sense to me. But anyway, so I was just kind of like horrified by everything that happened and that occurred. And they never once announced it over the intercom. Never announced it. Nothing was ever done. None of those riders were ever docked points. It was just brushed off like nothing even happened. And I actually spoke to the mom of the child who was down, and she was like, yeah, I didn't even see that incident because I was too focused on the other incident where the mother was covering the child. You know, and there was like one story that somebody had told me off of that Motocross Moms and Wives page that said that whenever they went to like tell them about this and that it had occurred and like what had happened, like all the event promoters were focused on was, well, did you jump the fence too? Because we can disqualify you as well, this and that, da-da-da. Like they weren't worried about the life of the child, like laying there on the ground for 7 minutes as their race still continued when it should have been red flagged. You know, like, I don't understand. And then you think about like just how much extra money like we all pay to like get in and stuff. I feel like us as moto parents should be treated with a little bit more respect, you know, as like the sport lives on, and because our kids want to race motocross and they love to race motocross. But I just think that, I don't know, I feel like there's more that could be done. Like I had this great idea that I was really hoping to talk to Dib Goddard about, and maybe I'll just throw this out there, and maybe VetMX will come across this and maybe they can pick it up and do something with it. So, you know, I support military so much. I support vets so much. My husband's a combat veteran. You know, I am, my cousin is, you know, a Billy Badass. I love him to death. He's like my brother. And, you know, we're very, very much supportive of the military. And I started thinking, I was like, who better trained? You know, we have veterans everywhere, especially in motocross. I'm like, who better trained than to be like, let's say, like our flaggers and our like medic response, right? Because sometimes you need to have a responder who is able to respond to like a very traumatic incident, right? It's not just like, oh, you bumped your knee or you got a broken arm. Sometimes it's way worse than that, you know, and you need somebody who is like trained to do that. So who better than to like create this nationwide network through veterans that they could be trained to be our flaggers and our medic responders. I think we need more responders on the track, especially for these like really big tracks. I don't think 3 4-wheelers was honestly enough that weekend. I think that that's a large place, and really at anywhere where there are, you know, where big incidences or big wrecks could possibly happen, like within like a certain mile radius, you should have a 4-wheeler within certain mile radius so you can get to that rider in less than, let's say, 60 seconds, you know, less than 90 seconds at least, because, you know, even a minute and a half is a long time in, you know, motocross whenever a serious incident has occurred. And our flaggers, you know, I think that whenever you're training, let's say these veterans, you know, who are like the best in the world at training for anything, I think that they would be perfect for this, right? They care about people. That's why they signed up to do what they did, you know? And I think that it would be a great way to like give back and show our support for veterans as well. I think that with as much money as like MX Sports makes and, you know, all of these other, you know, organizations, I think that they could chip in, you know, more. I'll pay an extra $5. I won't even complain about the price. In fact, if that money was going to getting us good trained flaggers, good trained trauma response medics, you know, and that we're supporting veterans at the same time, giving them a purpose again too. You know, vets want to have a purpose. They have a mission. They're like mission driven. And, you know, I think it's a great mission, you know, while like supporting people's, you know, dreams and aspirations and vision. And if they could help, you know, to possibly save a life that day, I'm sure that that's 100% what they would sign up to do. And so I think that that would be a great idea. I am like an idea factory. Like I can just spit them out all day long. I just, you know, we're going to have big names that, you know, are the ones that are hosting these. Okay, honey, that are hosting these, you know, big events that we could just, let's brainstorm, you know, like let's work together. Let's do something to make our sport better, safer, because like if we're not practicing and focusing on this in the amateurs, how are those amateurs ever going to make it to pro motocross? You know what I mean? If they're getting injured and taken out of the sport before it even truly began for their career, you know? And so I think that, you know, just by us talking about these things, and maybe that's what this will be a manifestation of, you know, maybe we can get some responses back from these, you know, big top people. Maybe let's simplify the rules and regulations book, you know, let's update it. Let's, you know, everything doesn't have to be the way it was just because the way it was. You know, if consciousness elevates and changes, well, so can we, you know, and I think that we can just set a higher standard. We don't want to have flaggers out there that are, you know, all day. That happened and occurred that weekend as well. You know, we want people who are aware, conscious, and ready and are treating it as if it is life or death, because it is, you know? And so anyway, this is part 2. I would love to hear from anybody who else has like stories or anything that they experienced, or even at your local tracks, like, you know, and maybe our local tracks can, you know, see this and implement some of these ideas, or they can reach out to me and maybe we can work on, you know, these things together. Like, I would love that. And I pray that that is what happens, you know, with this, because I just want accountability, and I just want, you know, safety measures met for our children, you know, because they give it their all, and I feel like the sport should give it their all back to them. You know what I mean? All right. Anyway, have a blessed night, guys. Have a good one. Bye.